for people who can't be bothered to keep up with this continuously changing world. Here's May's IRL patch notes. Hackers from a group called DarkSide used an unintended exploit to shut down nearly 9,000 kilometers of US pipeline this month. The infamous group has reportedly used this method to gain at least 90 million in Bitcoin in the past 9 months alone, which by the time this video comes out could be worth literally any amount of money you could think of. Players from the US server who had been closely studying last year's Australian toilet paper meta began immediately hoarding petrol in anything they could find, including barrels, bins, and plastic bags. One woman even set herself on fire after hoarding nearly 100 liters of fuel and subsequently took minor fire damage. The PvP zone between Israel and Palestine continues to be just as much of a bloody and confusing mess as it's been for the last 100 years. Like many conflicts, this one more or less came from the British Empire, the world's greatest colonial faction, who spec'd exactly 0 points into the map drawing skill tree. Fast forward to the current patch, and both Israel and Palestine are still in bitter disagreement over the land that's been contested since the tea-drinking monarchy got the victory royale over the Ottoman Empire. Viewers who want the situation explained in any meaningful depth can wait for an upcoming video on the topic. The long data mined climate change update, which is speculated to feature exciting survival gameplay, might have just been postponed by the world's largest trolling faction, the US military. Representatives have argued that as the effects of climate change are likely to displace and potentially radicalize affected populations, it is in the interest of national security to find greener ways to maintain its KD ratio. Climate change related weather events have previously caused serious hindrances to US combat effectiveness in the past, with hurricanes wiping out billions in military assets and wildfires forcing the evacuation of domestic bases. Logistically, the military also seeks to respec its vehicles to run on electric power, as a reliance of fossil fuels poses a potential bottleneck in their essential supply chain. The developers have realized that players are much more likely to engage in the CO2 reduction system when it's a byproduct of maximizing DPS output. One of the effects of the highly unpopular COVID-19 world event has been the lack of new players entering the game. Although many speculated that the restriction of regular activities would lead to a much higher spawn rate, the frequency of new players in the United States has declined 7% since the pandemic took hold. This is mostly due to the uncertainty of the game's economic system, which appears to have made players below the age of 40 question whether they could afford to dabble in the expensive Parenthood DLC. Meta-analysts believe that this segment of the player base is still recovering from the fallout of the global financial crisis and patch 20.08, and in many cases, have decided to postpone children until their finances are more secure. It's predicted that this lower birth rate may become a larger problem into the future, as it will be harder for working-aged people to support the older player base, who tend to stop grinding into the late game. The Colombian region saw players become particularly angry this month when tax-related balance changes were proposed, which would increase the difficulty of the low-income segment of the nation. Colombia is already one of the most unequal nations in the world, and the thousands of poor citizens who struggle to buy even some of the most basic items didn't find comfort in the fact that the new tax changes would provide a stat increase to the nation's international credit score. Thousands took to the street to protest against the government for nerfing their ability to feed themselves, which led to violent police crackdowns and the deaths of over 40 Colombian citizens. The balance changes were rolled back after the backlash. However, the whole killing civilians situation certainly didn't make the protest movement any less angry. At the same time, impoverished millionaires protest the richest man on earth to pay more taxes. A Louisiana lawmaker makes the case that children should be taught the good parts of slavery, and the person who most resembles a supervillain dresses up as a supervillain.